Hey there, Rednecks, Preppies, Redneck Preppies. It's me, the Redneck Preppy. How you doing today? Great, good. So with this video, we'll embark on what I hope to be a long-term review of the Kodiak Defence WK180-C rifle. It is Canadian designed and manufactured, and also based on the venerable AR-180B platform. So with the prohibition order that was announced by the federal Liberal government back in May 2020, Canadian sport shooters have had relatively few options for modern sporting rifles. Those that are chambered in .223 Remington /5.56 millimeters, like the Benelli MR1 and the Tavor X95, tend to be fairly expensive. Now there are alternatives up here in Canada. They're not exactly inexpensive either, just less expensive. One of them is the aforementioned WK180-C, which Kodiak Defence introduced a few years ago. Now the rifle has had some birthing pains, including bolt faces that have deformed, charging handles that have had a habit of snapping off. But the company has been fairly good about fixing those issues both for individual gun owners and the design of the components themselves. So I recently purchased one to get my .223 Remington fix, since my AR-15 is currently locked up, waiting for the inevitable confiscation. And we'll see how this rifle is faring these days with those issues. Most of the problems seem to have been exclusive to the first generation of rifles that the company produced, but part of this review is also going to tackle reliability, and we'll see if anything has actually changed. Now, let's go over the rifle's basics. Although you can get it for a bit cheaper, the MSRP for this rifle is $1,250 Canadian, or about $1,000 US. For Americans, you have to remember that firearms do cost more in Canada, particularly non-restricted modern sporting rifles. We call it the non-restricted tax up here. It's likely that you can buy this cheaper than $1,000 in the US. I know it's for sale at many stores in Canada, so you won't have a problem obtaining one. I am not up to speed where you can get it in the United States, though. It's a semi-automatic rifle with a short-stroke gas piston system. It weighs about 7.25 pounds unloaded, and it is, as I mentioned, chambered in .223 Remington and 5.56 millimeters. The chrome Moly Lined Free-Float Barrel has a 1 1/8 twist rate. It's 18.7 inches in length without and 19.9 inches with the A2 birdcage flash hider installed. That flash hider can be removed. The rifle itself is about 39 inches with the buttstock fully extended, about 32 inches at its most compact. The body of the upper and lower are both made out of 6061 T6 aircraft grade aluminum and has a black hard coat anodized class 3 finish on it. You've got yourself an M1913 Picatinny Rail along the top of much of the rifle, and the foregrip also has M-lock attachment points. Now it does share minor parts with the AR-15, most notably the trigger pack, but outside of that there isn't much outside that you can swap. It does take your typical Stanag pattern magazines, and it does not come with sights. Now, this rifle isn't completely stock. I got rid of the standard parts bin AR-15 buttstock it came in favor of this Magpul CTR carbine stock. And obviously I mounted this completely unimpressive scope, which at some point is going to be swapped out for something a little more high-end. You can't see it, but I also got rid of the stock trigger, your typical hideous AR-15 trigger, which the company says has a 7 to 8 pound pull in favor of a Trigger Tech adaptable 2 to 5 pound trigger that I have set for about 2.5 pounds. So this video is going to be my initial impressions of the rifle after putting 200 rounds through it over a few days, both for sighting the scope and shooting some groups. Afterwards, I'll be revisiting this rifle periodically, likely at the 500 and 1000 round marks, to see how it's holding up. Now that we're done the preamble, let's look how it did during its first 200 rounds. So the accuracy part of this review. Like any smart firearms manufacturer, Kodiak Defense doesn't like answering questions about what kind of accuracy you can expect out of this rifle outside of the standard within industry expectations kind of spiel. Make a promise and some chuckleheads who can't shoot complain, return their rifle, and you really are only causing problems for yourself. That said, online forums aren't exactly bursting with praise over the inherent accuracy of these rifles. Most seem to think you can get about 3 to 4 MOA out of your rifle, which doesn't win any fans from people who are spending $1,250 Canadian for a rifle and expecting, at least 1 MOA performance. So how did I do? Well, during my initial tests with the WK180-C, I used a cheap Leapers UTG 3-9 30x32 scope. It's unfortunately all I had available to me at the time. In factory ammunition, specifically Federal's American Eagle brand with 55 grain bullets, purportedly military grade. If you've ever served, that's as much of a warning as it is an endorsement. That said, after 50 yards, after I sighted in the scope, I shot on average 2.660 MOA. Not fantastic, but it was brutally hot the day I was shooting, and I felt as comfortable as a roast chicken in the oven. Now, next up, I shot at 100 yards, and after sighting in the scope there, I slightly improved my average group size to 2.600 MOA. Again, I found it unpleasant to try precision shooting in stifling weather. Steel gong shooting, all day, wouldn't have minded. Bench shooting, not so much. So my initial tests suggest that this rifle is not the bullet hose that some people have described it as. It's possible that I got, lucky with my 2.6 MOA shooting, though the consistency of the results over multiple groups at 50 and 100 yards tends to suggest otherwise. At any rate, future tests are going to be conducted using my hand loads. I'll be using 55 grain bullets over a as yet to be determined load of H335 powder and Winchester small rifle primers. Hopefully I can at least replicate the accuracy of the Federal ammunition. If I can't do it with H335, I may try BLC2. I would prefer using Varget for my 223 Remington loads, but that powder is currently unobtainium. Also, hopefully I get a chance to upgrade the scope, and I am looking at one right now to do so. Okay, now that we're up to speed as to how the rifle did at the range, I'll give you my first impressions about this rifle. Now the list of cons I'm going to give you are lengthy, but I think you'll find most of them are just picking nits. So I'll go from least serious to most serious. First, the charging handle is too small. I really think it could have been a bit longer. Also, I've heard reports that it has broken off while charging the handle. Now, there are aftermarket charging handles that are reinforced and longer, but I think this is something that Kodiak Defense should have changed after the first gen rifles. Second, there is actually no forward sling attachment points. I had to redneck this up. This is an aftermarket stock. It has the same, though, attachment points as the stock one, the stock. It has a quick detach point, as well as your traditional sling slot. But there isn't one at the front of the rifle. Instead, I have to actually buy something like an M-lock attachment point on my own. It's not a deal breaker, but it's one of those kind of things that just annoys me a little bit. The stock trigger is awful, as befitting anything from the AR family of rifles. There's a lot of creep before you get to that breaking point, although I have to say it breaks okay at least. Kodiak Defense says it's a 7 to 8 pound trigger pull. I don't have a gauge to measure that, but it seems about right. Still sucked though. There's a lack of a manual bolt hold open or bolt release. The rifle does hold open on an empty magazine, but if you want to chamber a round after a magazine change, the charging handle is your only option. Kodiak Defence does sell a part for $55 Canadian that replaces the stock bolt hold open on an empty magazine, and it allows you to manually hold the bolt open and release it. I really, though, think it should have been part of the rifle. This charging handle, speaking of, needs to be tight in order not to revolve. Oh, there you go. Mine's revolving, and it could actually come off during firing. Of course, going hard on the tightening could also potentially stress the metal, and it could break during use, so you might want to buy some extra ones. This one isn't picayune. The picture that I'm showing you right now, it has a defect on the rail on top of the rifle. As the rifle breaks open, that means that the Picatinny rail is actually in two parts. On my rifle, as you can see by the picture, my pick rail doesn't exactly line up. It's minor, and it probably wouldn't affect the sighting and use of something like backup iron sights, but for $1,250, I expect the rails that line up perfectly. My AR-15 has two section of rails, and they line up perfectly. Is this picky? Maybe, but again, it's the kind of thing that really kind of bothers me. On to the pros. Now, I know I just jumped on Kodiak for manufacturing issue, but the rest of the rifle is actually fairly well built. It's relatively light for a long rifle, probably because it's made out of aluminum. It feels solid, and people at the gun range, where it attracted quite a bit of attention, were all pretty impressed with the build quality. So am I, at least so far. It's reasonably accurate. I'm withholding real judgment on that until I get my hand loads ready. But with essentially bulk factory ammunition, yeah, I didn't do that bad. 2.6 MOA. Well, better than most people can shoot these days. It's got an ambi safety. And I actually like that. My thumb isn't long enough to reach sometimes when I'm using this rifle, but I can manipulate it with the fingers on my right hand. So that's a vote in favor from me for that ambi safety. There is some parts interchangeability with the AR-15, so those of you with prohibited AR-15s in Canada can at least reuse some of your aftermarket parts. That said, you're probably going to be limited to things like butt stocks, pistol grips, trigger packs, pistol grips that don't have that beaver tail on the back. Outside of that stuff, anything that goes on your pick rail or M-lock, that's really about it. Remember that this is based on the AR-180B platform, not the AR-15. Overall, at this early stage, I'm reasonably happy with the rifle. I wish it were a bit cheaper, but you're paying for the privilege of a non-restricted modern sporting rifle manufactured in Canada. So it is what it is. Hopefully going forward, my positive thoughts about this rifle only deepen. At any rate, that's it for today. At any rate, stay tuned for future episodes concerning this rifle. I hope you found the video entertaining and at least vaguely informative. As always, I hope you have yourself a fantastic day, and may all of your shots ring true. Take care. Bye-bye.